This is going to be exciting.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for driving up to do this.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
We met in, I'm going to tell how we met because it's in a very interesting way. So there is I guess, would you call it a women's group, The Drip?
It's a very much a women's group.
Very much a women's group. You guys should check them out if you're women listening to this. It's in South Florida, and they're awesome. And I didn't know that. And a patient and a good friend of mine was like, hey, you should go to this next meeting that they had that she posted about. And I didn't look anything up. I just registered and showed up, and I walk into a room, and it's all women, and they're staring at me like, why are you here? And I'm like, oh my God, this is awkward. So then to not look like a creep, I name dropped who sent me, and they're like, oh my God, we love her. You know, it was awesome. And so I basically sat through this whole thing, and we were laughing about it, but then they were like, tell us about what you do. And then I told them, like, okay, this actually does make sense, like why you're here and, the people that we know and all this stuff. And so we got connected through that and got Starbucks and then just bonded. I mean, we probably could have talked for 3 hours just at that Starbucks. And, one of the things you mentioned in there and I want to talk about here is you were like, all right, well, tell me your backstory. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about all those things. And you're like, oh, that's what makes you a good father. And then you shared your backstory. And so I think that's a good place for us to start. So let's start. You're a kid and let's go through it because I think that a lot of people can probably relate to this.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And to your point, when I met you, I knew we'd be fast friends, as they say. So originally from outside of Philadelphia, a little town called Malvern, Pennsylvania.
Motherland, baby.
Go Birds, go Eagles.
Come on now.
Gotta throw that in there with a Steelers fan. So born outside of Philadelphia, and my mom, I think, was 23 at the time. She was younger. Back in the 70s, having a child younger was, I wouldn't say more appropriate, but it was just more, I guess, culturally appropriate, right?
Yeah.
So she had me when she was 23 and was with a guy, was not married.
I mean, you think about it, back then, you're out of high school, you're pretty much living your life at 23.
Exactly.
By then,
Yeah, and it's I think back to myself at 23, I couldn't clean my room, let alone have a child, right?
It would have been the worst thing.
So she was with a guy, gentleman, who obviously my biological father, and he just, Rocco just wasn't meant to be a dad. I've forgiven him a million times over. He passed away, 9-10 years ago. And my mom did the best she could. That's what I'll say. My mom did a great job doing the best she could. He left, and funny enough, he moved to Florida when I was about 2 or 3. He moved to Bradenton, Florida, in I'd say early 80s. And I would get notes from him, Christmas, birthday. My birthday's in August. I get a birthday card in August. Maybe $20 cash in the card back when they used to send cash.
Yeah.
Remember that getting cash in the mail?
Loved it.
Like, I can expect $20 from my biological father. I haven't seen him in a year, but here comes my $20. Right? So, lived mainly with my grandparents at this point, outside of Philadelphia. My mom, my grandmother, my grandfather. These are my mom's parents. And my mom, well, let me back up. Funny enough, when my biological father left when I was like 2 or 3, his parents, he was adopted as well.
Okay.
In life, my biological father met his biological father for about 5 minutes in total.
Jesus. Think
about that. So he only met his dad, his biological father, for 5 minutes. He was adopted. And then here I am too, right? So he's just a guy when you look at the blueprint of a father, he probably just wasn't meant to be a dad.
Sure.
Probably got drunk with my mom.
Oops.
Here we go, right? Yeah. Exactly, that kind of thing. So it's late 70s or early 80s. Everyone's having a good time. My mom goes on to get married. My last name is Dellapenna, so my stepfather adopted me. So I'm technically, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, adopted, even though I've always been with my mom. It's not like I was adopted from a
foster home.
A foster home, exactly sure. Right. So my stepfather adopted me, last name Dellapenna, and this was probably around first grade. And then I'm gonna, fast forward through a lot here because this is just the boring stuff. But pretty athletic, decent student, involved with school, that kind of thing. My sister was born when I was 8 or 9. She had cerebral palsy, still does, obviously. Silly comment, but she had CP, which made a very interesting dynamic within the family.
Sure.
My stepfather owned his own business, was working quite a bit. I don't want to call him a workaholic, but worked a lot. And when my sister was born, my mom started drinking quite a bit, right? So I remember coming home to a drunk mom, a lot of that going on. And I remember all these stories I remember there's probably 12 or 13 occurrences that I can name off the top of my head. We're talking mid to late 80s that I remember like that off the top of my head. Let's see. They divorced my sophomore year of high school, obviously. It wasn't going well. I'm lucky enough to stay in the house that I grew up in for many years through 12th grade. And after that, went to college, was the first kid in my family to go to college, University of Massachusetts. After UMass, went right to New York City, moved right to New York.
Did you play sports in college? Is that what took you there? Or
So funny enough, my grandparents actually, as I understand it, met in Vermont, which is kind of random. We're sitting here doing this in South Florida. Yeah. We don't talk much about Vermont here, right? But they met in
way up there.
Exactly. They met in Vermont, and I kind of always had this, not love affair with New England, but I thought it would be cool to go to school in New England. So I visited University of Massachusetts. It was a 5-hour drive, 300 miles away. My mom couldn't come bug me. It wasn't close to home, so I could really truly learn how to live by myself. So graduated UMass, moved right to New York City for 10 years. Long story short, again, meet a girl, Florida Gator, up in New York. We meet in 2005, start dating, married in 2009. Our daughter Elizabeth is born 2011. We moved to Florida, like I said. We divorced in 2016. And it has been just the definition of the co-parenting jackpot.
Yeah.
So I've skipped over a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you want to dig on some things here. But that is, in a nutshell, who I am. And of course, we're probably going to concentrate a lot on my childhood here and kind of what made me the what I think a great dad. And a lot of that stems from my childhood and what I saw and what not to do. And I went the other way, and I chose a choice to parent the exact opposite way of the way I was parented.
Yeah, because everything's a choice. Let's make sure that's clear to everybody. So let's start there, because I think it's fascinating. I think it teaches people a lot. I mean, just in that sentence alone, like, you do the opposite of what you don't like and things will turn out pretty well. But let's talk about that. Talk about the childhood, the things you saw, and the things that made you make that conscious choice to be like, that's not how I want to continue to, plant seeds into this earth.
Yeah, I remember specifics. So one night my mom had to call me from jail. I was her one phone call. Right. She called me. I remember clearly one time coming home. So this was after the DUI. I remember coming home one time in, I'm going to say, freshman, sophomore year of high school. Could be off by a year or two. I get home. We had a late bus from practice. So all the athletes would take the late bus home. There was like the regular bus at 3, and then we took the 4:30, 5 o'clock bus, whatever it was. I remember walking home, and I'll never forget this, Rocco. You'll love this. It was my grandmother's had a blue. This is like a 1985 Pontiac. Okay. Remember Pontiac?
Yes.
Her Pontiac.
I had a Pontiac Sunfire. I bought it for $1,500. Had a gold hubcaps.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a beast.
Exactly. I mean, this car's probably still on the road somewhere, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Has to be.
Yeah.
But this car was sitting in my driveway, and I said, that doesn't seem right. And I remember walking into my house, and my grandmother, I remember she was wearing a floral dress that day. This is 30 plus years ago. I remember her car. I remember the dress she was wearing. And she said to me, Casey, you're not gonna be able to talk to your mom for a month. And this is well before cell phones and email and all that stuff.
Sure.
So you're not gonna be able to talk to your mom. So I said, what's going on? And she said she checked herself into rehab. And I guess the way it works is you're not allowed to talk to that person. They have to be in rehab. I want to say it was a month, right? 30 days. And there was no contact with my mom at that point. And I'll tell you, Rocco, looking back at that was probably the one hardest moment I've had in my life, to have to work through that and what that looked like, because I want to say at that point they were either going through a divorce or just gotten divorced. So my stepfather, while he was around, he was just not a great dad.
Yeah.
He was, I can't say a lot of awful things about him. There were some occurrences that made me think twice about how he was as a father. But again, just was not a great dad. I haven't had great luck with fathers.
Okay.
Right? Which makes me who I am.
Yeah.
And there it is. Yeah. Right? And our boy Tony Robbins, who I don't love, but he said something effective. Tony Robbins' mom was a little challenging. And he said, if my mom was a woman I wanted her to be, I wouldn't be the man I am today. Yep. Right? And so I look back at this stuff and that specific occurrence, and I say, listen, had this not happened to me, I wouldn't be the man I am. And I took all these, there was another occurrence, and I don't want to bore you or folks who actually might listen to this with these occurrences. But I remember one night laying with my sister in my room. She's got to be 3 or 4 years old. So that makes me, 11, 12, 13. And I hear this bang in the kitchen. And I kind of ran out to the kitchen, and my mom was in a pool of blood on the floor. Either she had fallen or pushed. She'd been drinking by my stepfather. She either tripped or I still don't know.
Yeah.
And she hit her head against a baseboard, bottom corner of the wall. And as you know, that's probably one of the hardest places to fall. Pool of blood. And I remember the cops came, all that kind of stuff. So I don't remember what came of it because that's all kind of been blocked out except for that occurrence. But I don't remember exactly what came of that. But again, another occurrence. And I say this, I sit here with a smile on my face as I tell these stories because, to all you dads out there, specifically single dads, you can define yourself by these experiences, or you can choose to go against these experiences and create what you think is the best experience for your child. And that's what I've done. So can go on. There's more experiences, but those are but between the rehab.
That shapes that definitely shapes the baseline of like where we're going to go. And so you go, I do want to get into, I guess my question for you is then, growing up in that, it was definitely easy to not want to potentially push yourself, or then it gave you the energy to push yourself to go to UMass, to create this thing, to move to New York. Like, it could have went one of two different directions, so was there did you feel an underlying motivation of like, I have nothing to support this, like I have to fucking make this, or because you could have just became a drunk and an alcoholic and partied, did all those things.
Statistically, right, when they say you have two alcoholic parents, my biological father was also an alcoholic. Statistically, they say, good chance you're going to have it.
Yeah.
Maybe it skipped me. Maybe it's a choice. That's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
If you lean into the alcoholism and say, this is my excuse, right? But what I think I was blessed with was, first of all, at one point in my life, I had 3 amazing sets of grandparents. Okay. Think about that. So I had my mom's parents, my stepfather's parents, and then really cool part of the story, my biological father's parents stayed in my life for a very long time.
Okay.
Very long time. So I don't know if they saw in an early age, like, hey, our son probably isn't going to be a great dad. Let's show this kid some love. Let's try to at least get him on the right start.
Beautiful.
And they did. And to this day, sitting here in 2023, I'm so thankful. My grandfather passed away. So my biological father, his dad passed away in, I want to say, 86 or 87. I've been without this guy for 30 plus years, and I still think about him daily. Wow. I still think about his mom daily. She passed in 85 or 86 in around those. My grandfather, his passing was it was my first big death in my life. And I want to say I was middle school. So that would have been about right. I think the motivation really came from seeing these grandparents, and they were all in stable marriages, seeing what family could and might look like. So I took cues from that. I think the other thing, maybe more importantly, I had the most amazing group of friends in high school.
Yeah.
Guy friends.
Same.
And when I'd go, they'd come to my house, I'd go to their house, and I'd always go to their house and say, wait a second, look how this dad treats this mom. Look how there's nobody drunk at this house. Look how there's nobody yelling and screaming at this house. Listen, every couple's going to have their fights, right? But I was always taken aback by just the normal, quote unquote, normalcy. I'm using air quotes again, quote unquote, normalcy of these real parents and what they're supposed to look like. And I think that when all my buddies, I wasn't really thinking about going to college until I was in maybe junior. College just wasn't a thing because no one in my family had gone to college. My mother did the best she could. She never said, Casey, you need to go to school. It's it wasn't a thing. I don't know. I was just going to kind of find an odd job around town and figure it out. But when my buddies started going to Penn State, right? You get it, Penn State. And my buddy Jeff went to James Madison. One of my really good friends went to University of Pennsylvania. So I saw all my buddies going to college. I said, hey, you know what? Let me look into that. This college thing's kind of
that bad.
It sounds like maybe I should think about doing this. Yeah. So the UMass thing just kind of jumped out. I applied to a few schools, got into most of them. I had really good extracurriculars. I wasn't the best student, but I also wasn't really pushed very hard. Or at least I don't think I was pushed very hard. And got into UMass, visited UMass, loved it, and just really, so I guess to answer your question, it's really, I think the drive, for some reason I picked up at an early age, I want to get out of this.
Yep.
What this is.
And no one's here really to take care of it.
Listen, I grew up if those listen here, Malvern, Pennsylvania is a beautiful town. The problem with Malvern, Pennsylvania is when people say to you, oh, you're from Malvern, Pennsylvania, how much land did you own? How many horses do you have?
Yeah.
We didn't grow up that way. We grew up in what's called Malvern Borough, more working class, and then out in the horse country, as we'd call it. I had some friends who grew up with a lot of money. We just didn't have that, right? So I think the challenging part there was seeing all this wealth in my community and then realizing, you know what, maybe I do need to go to college just to extend my, or I guess kind of get more educated, because I too want to live a life.
They just know something I don't know yet. That's
Exactly
you
right.
know, and it's
so
fun to find that.
Just having the group of guys around me was phenomenal.
Yeah. So we graduate UMass, you move to New York, and you get what most people I think would claim is kind of somewhat of a dream job. So let's talk about that and how long that lasted and what it was like and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So again, this is before, like, email was kind of a thing. It was 2000. So 99, 2000. Email was around, internet was around, but not really a full blown thing.
It still sounded like
exactly the AOL sound, the dial up. You're exactly right. So I remember my senior year at UMass finding this big, thick, like 3 or 4 inch book of just, I think the book was called like Executives in Sports.
Okay.
That was the name of the book. And it was in the grad office at UMass. And I sat there and I printed out, I got my resume done by some local person in Amherst, Mass. I remember she had a farmhouse. So I remember getting my resume done at it. My first, true story, my first resume I ever done was at a farmhouse in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is crazy. So I remember taking about 50 copies of my resume and just mailing them, old school snail mail, putting a name on an envelope, mailing it out and hoping for the best. I mailed, I don't know, like I said, 50 of them out, got a bunch of responses. And then it basically came down to a job offer in DC or a job offer in New York. And the New York job offer was ESPN.
Yeah.
And what, American sports fan male doesn't want to ever work for ESPN.
Especially at that time.
Exactly right. This is when ESPN this is 2000. ESPN is flush with cash. So I moved to New York City. I took the job, and I remember thinking, I can't fail at this, because if I fail, I'm going home. And I don't want to go home. So making very close to minimum wage. I was living in North Jersey at the time, commuting into the city. Then I eventually moved into the city 2 years later. But I remember getting the ESPN gig and coming back and telling all my guys, I'm going to work for ESPN. They're like, good for you, man.
Yeah.
Like, quote unquote, you made it.
Yeah.
And listen, it was a peon job, sales assistant. Long story short, there's a lot of commercial inventory, actual commercial spots on ESPN. I'd make sure they run correctly for the clients. That was my job. But with that came a whole litany of tickets, and whenever the Flyers were in town, I'd go see them play at the Garden, or if the Eagles were playing the Giants at the Meadowlands, I'd get tickets and didn't have to pay for any of that stuff. So it was pretty cool for somebody like me just to be like, oh my God, I can't believe where I came from to where I am now.
Yeah.
But again, the driver in that is not wanting to fail and not having a backup plan. My backup plan was moving home, so I could never let anything go wrong. So I busted my butt in New York City for the better part of 10 years. Because after 3 or 4 years out, you realize, like, I'm good on my own. Yeah. I don't need the help. And so I just always, my head was down. Listen, had some fun in my early 20s in New York City. It was a great time to be in New York. I was there from 2000 I ended up being there for a little bit under 10 years. And the ESPN job was just fantastic. And that kind of launched me on a advertising/sports path for quite some time before I moved to Florida. When I moved to Florida, we'll get into it. My Florida career has been, it's almost like separate chapters in a book. But it's cool that way. It's good. Like, I don't think anyone's career path is linear. And for those who do want to create a linear career path, go ahead. It just wasn't for me.
Sure.
Like, I've had a few different jobs. So, yeah.
So New York, did you meet your ex-wife in New York?
I did. I met her. She moved to New York. She's a Gator. For those listening, she's a big Gator. Met her in 2004, 2005. She actually ended up working at the advertising agency I was working at. After ESPN, I jumped over to an advertising agency. And
Mad Men.
Exactly right.
Life Mad Men.
Exactly right. Something like only a 25, 26-year-old guy making no money.
Even better. Yeah.
Very mad.
Yeah.
I was very mad.
Very mad.
Not making enough money. But then I met her. We hit it off, started dating. And then I want to say we moved in a few years later. And then we had the discussion. She's from a town called Malvern, Florida. And we moved to Florida in 2009. And so that was my New York City experience. Again, my New York City experience was more, like I said, advertising, sports-based. Worked for DIRECTV for a while when DIRECTV was, again, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Now it's really not much of a company anymore, but ESPN, DIRECTV, and had the advertising agency stint all within a period of 10 years. But met my ex. We moved to Florida in 2009.
Cool. All right, so now we're in Florida. It's 2009. And When was your daughter born? Let's go through the daughter being born, the divorce, all that kind of stuff, because that's where I think we really get into this stuff with being a dad.
Yeah. So move in 2009, daughter's born September 2011 in West Palm. We're living in West Palm, right up the street here. In 2011, living in Palm Beach Gardens. She's born at St. Mary's Hospital here in West Palm. And at that time, I wasn't working. I was working for an advertising agency in downtown West Palm. And I kind of started itching again. I want to get back into sports. I'd been at the ad agency in West Palm for 3 or 4 years, and we owned a beautiful townhome in Palm Beach Gardens. But I just said, hey, I really want to get back into sports. And my ex was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Supportive about that. And so she said, cool. We moved south. We moved to Miami Lakes, which is Dade County. So obviously Dade and Broward and Palm Beach are very different counties, very different living styles. So I worked at the University of Miami, ended up working at the University of Miami for 6 years. During that time, we did get divorced. I don't want to go into too many specifics on that. Yeah,
of course.
On the actual mechanics of that and why it happened. But I will tell you that I'm glad it happened.
Yep. That was the same thing we had in common. At first, you're broke.
Yep.
Broke. Like it was probably one of the lowest points of my life. And then now, 2-ish years later, it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
1,000,000%.
Yep.
And that is when I put the work in, right? You know about the work. You can say you want to work all you want, but are you really willing to do it? And,
you're talking about self-work.
Absolutely.
Yes. Just to make everybody,
Great point. Thank you. A lot of these guys say they want to put the work in, but they're too lazy to do it.
Or scared because it sucks.
It sucks.
And the podcast.
Drop the mic. And, a lot of these guys who go, and women for that matter, they kind of, for lack of a better term, just freak out. A lot of drinking, a lot of boozing, a lot of partying. That never happened to me.
Same.
It never happened to me.
I specifically steered away from it because it was the first time when all that happened in my life that I felt all of my feelings. And I was like, what are these? Where did they come from? And I better not shut them off because these mean something. And so I specifically did no drugs, no alcohol, nothing for months until I knew I was in control, knew what these things were, found out about them, worked with people. I mean, that was a hard conscious choice to make because it's very easy to open a bottle of tequila.
One of the hardest choices to make in my life was sitting at home. Thankfully, Rocco, too, and I'm assuming I don't know a ton about your situation, your divorce, that kind of stuff, but I had, again, a group of friends who had been through divorces. And I remember looking back, there's literally 3 or 4 conversations I've had.
My friends all got it right.
Okay, good. So mine did too.
Okay.
Mine did too.
High five.
Yeah, right.
Guess someone's got to be the fucking outlier.
Of course. No, I had good friends with good experiences, and they told me, one of my female friends said to me, she was my first female friend to get married. She said, Casey, you're going to be going through pain. Make sure you let that pain hit you. Let it envelop. I remember saying, let it envelop you, right? Don't push it away, because if you push this pain away, you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Think about that, the rest of your life. I said, okay, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So when this happened, I took it to heart. My recovery from the divorce was spend a lot of time alone, going for long runs, sitting on the couch, like just taking everything and reading, vacationing by myself, doing things by myself, going to the movies by myself, going to dinner by myself, which I still love to do, by the way.
I do that too.
Love doing that.
I do that too.
It's so good.
Everybody thinks I'm weird. I'm like, no, it's so awesome.
It's so good. I just literally this past weekend, I went to see a movie by myself.
Yep.
Just amazing. You walk in, you feel a little funky when you walk in, like, hey, everyone's looking at me, but who cares? No one really gives a damn anyway.
Yeah.
But that's not, love going to movies by myself. So again, never kind of went off the rails, as they say, put the work in. And I kind of knew as I was going through that I was going to get through this thing. And I eventually did. You wake up one morning, the pain's a little bit less, the pain's a little bit less, pain's a little bit less. Then one morning you wake up and you say, wait a second, like I'm not even mad anymore. I'll always remember it.
Yes.
But I won't. I've forgiven my ex many times over. She's a fantastic mom. And like many couples in America, rough patch, one person steps outside the marriage and we bore the brunt of it. So,
and I also think that, for me, back to the one day you'll wake up and you're going to be happy, right? So for me, I'd met a friend. We would talk all the time, and she had, gotten like left, and she was single, and all that kind of stuff. She lives down here. She's fucking awesome. And she was like, I promise you, she was like, the one thing I can promise you is that someday you are going to value the peace that you feel over everything else. And I remember like that day coming, and I was like, oh my God, she's fucking right. And now it's like, if you interfere with my peace, we can't do this, and that I put above everything else. And it was like, oh my God, it's the first time in my life I did that. And the struggle to get there, it took over a year, or a year at least, to push through that. And I remember I would tell myself, lay in bed crying. And I remember reading old metaphysical teachings a long time ago by Dr. Joseph Murphy. And he was like, when you're in such a bad state, financially or happiness or whatever, and you say the words, I am happy, you push it farther away from you because you don't believe you can be happy because you're in such despair. He's like, so how he augmented that for the subconscious mind. And I tell myself this every night before I go to sleep. I tell myself, in essence, a lullaby, and I say these things over and over again. And I say health, wealth, success, over and over until I fall asleep, right? It's a lullaby I give myself. And he was, because in that time, in that gap between awake and asleep is when you have unfeathered access to the unconscious mind, which is a whole nother podcast that I can do. But I used to literally wake up every day and write the word happy on a piece of paper hundreds of times, because it's a psychomotor neuro effect. It activates your entire brain. And while I was at my lowest ever, I was like, okay, but I can't stay here. I have to figure it out. And so part of that work was just writing the word happy over and over. Not I am happy, just happy, 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 happy. And I'll tell you what, when you come out the other side, it's like, it's so freeing. It's so freeing. But it's taking massive responsibility, because when someone does that, they didn't just do it without there being you as a part of it too.
I ask myself, and that brings up a whole another question, right? When somebody in marriage steps outside the marriage, again, I'm not sitting here to badmouth anybody, but I did not step outside my marriage. You think to yourself, what could I have done differently?
Sure.
As a husband.
Sure.
My daughter was 3 years old at the time, 2, 3, 4 years old, around there. On the surface, I was a great dad, gainfully employed.
Yep.
I certainly didn't abuse or, my ex. So you think, what could I have done differently, right? And in many cases, I don't know that there is an answer, right?
Well, and there might not be.
Yep.
There might not be, and that's where the free will of all human beings comes into play.
Exactly right.
And so, but it's not taking it personal is a huge part of it, right? And being able to realize that, like, I can get through this. One of my favorite sayings that not John Gottman, Dr. Glover wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. If you're a man and you have not read No More Mr. Nice Guy, it needs to be at the top of your reading list. Like tomorrow, buy it. You can get it from my Amazon store, but buy it for sure. Just click the link in the Instagram bio. He says in there, like, one of the things that he teaches everybody that he works with is, you can handle it and you will get through this. Like, as a man, you were literally made to be able to handle whatever you need to handle. And so then coming out that other side, and, for me, a huge aspect that helped, there's twofold. One, if someone were to do something like that, and step out of a marriage and there's no kids involved, fuck it. See you later. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Lesson learned. Made a mistake. No big deal. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear you talk about or feel from you all the time, like the last 2 times we spoke, was that you didn't have a choice because you were unwilling to not be a major part of your daughter's life. And you were unwilling to, not give her the best life possible. And that meant healing that relationship, creating a good co-parenting relationship, because the only thing that happens in a co-parenting relationship that's not healthy is the child gets hurt. That's it.
I remember thinking to myself, when I spoke to my attorney, we're going through the process, and I said, I'm taking my daughter, I'm moving back to Pennsylvania. And she kind of snickered. She said, okay. She said, you can move to Pennsylvania. You can go. It would put your daughter in the middle. It would be your daughter on airplanes back and forth. One of you bring her back. One has her for the summer. One has her for the school year. And I sit here thinking, and I remember this clearly. It was like a light bulb went off in my brain. I said, if I do this, I am my biological father. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? and this wasn't just I didn't come to this decision quickly, but it was, hey, you know what? I'm going to stay in South Florida. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make it work with my ex. We're going to co-parent, and we're going to be the best fucking co-parents we can be. And I've told you so many times, and I hear this so many times. People come up to us when they meet us. Like, we were at a dance tournament in Orlando recently, and a lot of the guys come up to like, how are you guys so good? I said, well, we've worked at it, right? But it's for our daughter, right? And we go to tournaments together, and we're going to be dropping off my daughter at summer camp here next week, actually, together. So it's what we do. It's kind of, we basically live across the street from each other. So we're wired. Listen, when my daughter graduates high school, and if she wants to move out and go explore, I don't know that I'd stay in South Florida. Right?
Sure.
But
reasonable.
Until then, I want her to have everything that I didn't have. Long story short.
Well, and I think part of that initial reaction of hurt is you want to get revenge, and you know that the child is an aspect of being able to inflict revenge and pain on the other person, and you want to run away from the pain. So if you can take your daughter to Pennsylvania, get revenge on your wife, and run away from the pain, boy, that feels good. And so I don't think that, I think people don't want to acknowledge the dark side of like what you actually think about as a man when you go through all that stuff. Like I had, when I had finally told, my family members everything that was going on, one of them suggested, they were like, so what do you want to do? You want to come back to PA? And I'm like, well, Sloan can't come. And they're like, no, and then I was like, phew. And they definitely came at it from more of an aspect of like, you hurt someone I love, so how can then we inflict pain on that person that hurt someone I love? And so thank God I was working with, Heather, my life coach, and these people at those times to not feed into that and be like, God, but it didn't feel good even then. Like even then it was like, this doesn't feel good. I don't think that that's something I want to do. And so when you push that aside, and then, you guys have created an amazing co-parenting relationship. And I think that that's just invaluable because your daughter also gets to see that you can fuck up and you can also heal and you can forgive. And if you go through life without forgiving anybody,
no, you're right. It's the forgiveness. And again, it's the divorce to me is so far in my rearview mirror right now. Mm-hmm. It's not even registering in my rearview mirror at this point.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I have a buddy going through divorce right now, and he's been leaning on me for some tips and tips of the trade. Right. And he said to me recently, he said, Casey, no one told me how addicting the freedom is. And
I got a story about that one after you go through this, but go ahead. Yeah.
And I said, you're exactly right. And I said, I'm sorry I didn't prep you for the freedom, because he has two little girls. One's middle school age, one's 3rd or 4th grade. And when he doesn't have them, he's alone. So you go from being a dad, a great dad, by the way, to 2 daughters, to having your daughters half the time. If you can fill in that empty space with something valuable, be it self-improvement or teaching yourself something or working out or something, and keeping, like I said to you, my daughter's in Oregon right now with her mom.
Yeah.
And when we scheduled this date, I was so excited because, good, that gives me something more to look forward to when my daughter's not around. If you can fill that gap in that space when you're not with your child, you've got it figured out.
Yep.
You've got it absolutely figured out, because that is a game changer. And when you're comfortable, this is a relationship point, but when you are comfortable alone, there's a quote, a person content alone is a very dangerous person.
Yep.
Dangerous in a good way.
Yes.
When you, and that's me, I am so content alone. It's a challenge for dating for me, quite frankly, because I love being solo.
I'm experiencing that now.
Yeah. I love being solo.
Yep.
And it's not that the people I've dated aren't worthwhile. Sure. It's that you get to a certain point and you say, I don't know that I want to share this with anybody. It's a weird feeling.
It is. And I think that's what that my friend was trying to explain to me, because she's like, I almost don't even want someone standing the night, because it's like, no, I'm good in my bed alone.
Right.
It's fascinating, and that the freedom that comes with that. And touching on the fact that, like, your daughter's in Oregon for a week, I would take my daughter 100% of the time right now. I would do it. It would be amazing. I would figure out how to do the time structure with a nanny. I would figure all of that out. But the times that she's away, like, your heart hurts and you're like, shit. But at the same time, you're like, okay, I get to then I have so much freedom that I can accept into my life, and that's, I think, absolutely fascinating. And I remember the first time I felt that, and I was I think I dropped my daughter off at school. I went to the gym. I was working out. I didn't have any clients that day. And I think that it was a night that she was with my ex. And I was like the middle of the day, I was like, I'm going to go to the diner. I went to the diner. And then I remember exactly what I ordered. I ordered corned beef and hash with 6 eggs over easy or sunny side up on top of them. I was like, take the corned beef and hash and put 6 eggs over top of it. The lady was like, what the fuck? I remember what I ordered. And I just sat there with the dumbest smirk on my face. And I was like, I didn't ask anybody if I could come here. I didn't tell anybody I was coming here. I didn't listen to a podcast I just sat in complete peace that I could do whatever the fuck I wanted without asking anybody anything. And that freedom's addicting.
Very addicting. Let me challenge you on something. Not challenge. Let me ask you more of a question.
Sure.
You said when you're not with your daughter, your heart hurts a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you, at the beginning of my journey post-divorce, my heart, it was very challenging. But I'm now to the point where I know that when she's not with me, she's being enriched. She has a great mom.
Sure.
Like right now, she's with her grandparents, her mom, and the rest of the extended family in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
So I know that she is having a blast.
Yes.
So I can replace my hurt. And I put a post up on LinkedIn like last year. I said, hey, this used to be a very challenging week for me. And I said, let's for anyone who wants to reconnect with me, let's reconnect. I had coffees with 20 different people this week last year, and it was amazing, right? So I know that she's having a good time. She's safe. She's being loved. So I can replace that kind of hurt in my heart, not being with my daughter, with she's good. She's having a good time. Listen, and I'm blessed to say that because I know a lot of divorced, maybe a lot of single dads out there don't have a great co-parenting relationship. Sure. I get that. So their kid may be in a different situation.
Right.
I lucked out where, never mind. It's not luck. I think we worked to do this. We worked to the point where and she knows my ex, when she's with me, she knows that her daughter's being loved, being cared for, and all that.
We've created the exact same scenario, and you're right, working at it, being conscious of it. It wasn't luck, but we did the exact same thing. And I guess my question for you would be, do you believe your daughter's 11, right?
Yeah, 11. Yeah, 12 in September.
12 in September. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's because of her age? Is it because Sloane's still 6 and everything is Dad's like, let's go shoot bows. She's like, let's go, And so I think that is honestly more of what I feel like. I'm like, oh, my heart hurts because of that. And I kind of know that all right, that 11, 12, she's really going to be like, all right, Dad, I love you. Let's definitely shoot bows, but once a month, not every Friday, and things like that. So do you think that plays a role in you being able to navigate it better? Because I definitely know when she's with her mom, she's well taken care of. She's implementing the right things. We talk about everything. We have the same belief systems. I mean, the reason we got married, we didn't get married on a whim. We were together a long time before we got married. We got married because we had the same beliefs on home birthing and vaccines and nutrition and exercise and all the big things. We believed all those core values together. So it's not like I take her to her mom's and her mom's like, well, we're going to drive through McDonald's, so I don't have to fucking lose my mind. So anyways, do you think it's because of the age?
So, yes, I do. I think that, and people have told you this, Rocco, you need to eat her up right now. This age, man, and if you see my face, you understand what I say when I eat her up. It's not literally eat her up. You need to appreciate every single moment between, I want to say the wonder years, between 3 and 7 or 3 and 8, every single moment you can spend with her, because there will come a change. And we've seen a few changes recently over the past 2 years where my daughter's always been very independent. Mm-hmm.
Sloane's pretty independent,
right?
Yeah.
And I think that I was talking with a friend recently, girl I'm dating now, and she said she hadn't seen her son and daughter in a while, and they saw her and they ran up, did one of those running jump start hugs. I said, I've only gotten 5 or 6 running jump start hugs in my life because my daughter's just not wired that way. She just never was. And I'll tell you with Sloane, appreciate and jump in. And you do. I know you do. Appreciate every single moment because the change will come. So yes, I do think it's an age thing. And I do think probably around that 8, 9, 10 time frame, you'll start to see her, all right, Dad, we're at a dance tournament in Orlando, and I'm talking to her in front of her friend. She's like, Dad, can you, go away? I feel like I'm a pretty cool dad. But I don't want to be a cool dad, because there's a difference between being a cool dad and being a good dad that's fun. Like there's a lot of cool, like the party cool dads. Like, I don't want to be that.
No, because the other one doesn't become a role model that they can lean on in hard times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and those conversations, again, she's into dance, so she's around young men and girls, and they're very self-aware in what they're wearing and who they're talking to, right? So I have to watch my tone when I'm around her. God forbid I put my arm around her in public when she's with her friends. She'll never talk to me again. So as a parent, and I've said this to her, Rocco, before, I've said to her, if she's not happy with something I did, I said, Elizabeth, to remind you, I've never been the parent of an 11-year-old girl before.
I love that you're that honest with her.
Listen, I don't know if she fully understands that statement.
But her subconscious does.
Yep. And I'll say to her, I'm going to make mistakes. I've made many mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes as you grow, but I will promise you one thing, that I'll do my best. So if I make a mistake, or if I say something to you in front of a boy that you think is cute, or if I put my arm around you in public and that embarrasses you, nothing I do, I'm not one of those dads that lives to embarrass their daughter.
Sure.
I just don't, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
I know a lot of dads do that. It's just not my thing. I want her to look at me, and I want her to be able to come to me and talk to me about anything. She has come to me before and told me about boys who she thinks are cute. How amazing is that a preteen girl goes to her dad and says, I think this boy's cute.
Unbelievable.
That to me, right? That to me is like, I'm doing something right.
Right. And that's what my goal to cultivate in Sloan is, like, to be able to have that absolute amazing open communication. And I think that what backs up her feeling so comfortable to be able to come to you about those things is if she says, hey, Dad, I bring the situation to you. Hey, Dad, I don't like it when you put your arm around me when we're in public because I really think this guy's cute and it kind of makes me feel this certain way. And then you don't do it. You reinforce to her that you can tell Dad things. Dad does want to listen to you. I am going to put it into play. And then you drive more of that trust into her, which John Gottman talks about, which I, again, feel like I bring this up every podcast, is the number one thing for women is in a partner is trustworthiness. And then is that it's extrapolated to your daughter and the father. The number one thing she needs is trustworthiness. Are you going to do what you say? It's that simple. Mm-hmm. And if you can do what you say, you will gain their trust, and then they will come to you with problems and situations. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm who I want her coming to, or her mom, because I trust her mom, sure. Right? But I don't want her going to, Sally down the fucking streets, mom, because I don't know what she thinks.
Or a friend.
It's also 11.
It's funny. And that, how do I say this? That kind of extrapolates itself as you get older too, because I remember saying when I was going through a divorce, my one buddy's like, why are you asking all these married guys about tips on how you should be a single dad? Think about that. He said, you're going to the wrong audience. Because I first went out to like all these guys who seem to be happily, like a lot of my buddies seem to be happily married, or they are happily married. I don't want to knock all of them. But I'd be asking all these divorce questions, and they'd give me answers, and guess what? They're the wrong fucking answers.
Wrong answers.
They're all wrong.
Wrong.
So had I known you in 2016, I'd have been your best buddy.
Sure.
You'd been sleeping over my house, watching TV, watching games, whatever it was, right? So I think as single dads too, so first of all, we want our daughters coming to us with these questions/concerns, and maybe even more importantly, as single dads, we need to be getting advice from the right people as well.
That's huge. I didn't even link that or put that together until you just said it. But because it's a completely different challenge. And it almost links back to the thing where, like, if someone doesn't have kids and they tell me they're busy, I'm like, stop. You're not. I don't care what job you have.
Don't know what the definition of busy is.
Yeah, you have no idea. And then you do it because I have made a choice to again, because everything's a choice. I've made a choice to do it on my own. I don't have another partner or, any of those things. And it juggles a lot, and it takes a lot of energy. And I think, that probably plays a role into how much I'm willing to allow someone to come into my life, because I know that at this point right now, my daughter's first. So I just recently, I love things to be organized and scheduled, but I hate being the one to have to put the organization and schedule together. It's such a conundrum. I understand, but I'm like, okay, my ex-wife had brought to my attention that Sloan, had said something about I work a lot. I'm like, okay. I do know that she links that because when she goes to bed, I give her a kiss and a hug, and I'm like, okay, Daddy's going to go get some work done. So I know there's a link there, but I was on my phone too much. So we made a phone jail, and my phone goes in it and all these things.
I love that.
But that's like, oh, it's awesome. You can find it on Instagram. We bought a box and painted it, and it was amazing. But I took a piece of paper and I just wrote the weekends in a week with them, like with Sloan, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I wrote the things that are super important to me down on a piece of paper. I was like, okay, Sloan, boom. And then you can list all the things under there. I want to, teach her how to ride a bike, go archery, hunting, or shooting, like all these things, whatever. But Sloan, the dad time business, the alchemy business, and personal care. And those were the 4 things. No one else or nothing else was in that list. And I was like, okay, that tells me something, right? And then I was like, okay, now these things get to go on this piece of paper. Not the tasks, just the things. And so Sloan went first, and I went to every day I had her, and I drew a line, and I blacked it all out. And then the weekend I had her, blacked out. And then I was left with the rest. And what is left in the rest got personal care every day, which, gym, sauna, whatever those things are for me, the meditations, anything like that. It went, personal care came next on the calendar, and then alchemy and dad time came next. And I realized there was almost no time for anything else. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't think I'm really at a point in my life right now where I'm ready for somebody, and that self-awareness, because I was dating somebody and the constant theme kept coming up is that I couldn't give them what they needed. And so being aware to be like, that's the reality of what a present single dad is bringing to the table right now. It just is what it is for me. Now, it doesn't mean I can't find somebody and they be super involved in my daughter's life. And not that this person wasn't at all. She was an amazing person. I was unwilling to participate fully on my end. And I will say that it was because I felt like I didn't have the emotional capacity and bandwidth at the end of the day to give that to.
Did she have kids?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that, again, I want to preface that she's an amazing woman. My ex-wife is an amazing woman. That was one of the things I'm not sure that parenting styles are very different and belief systems are very different. And that can become interesting when you parent a certain way and someone parents another way. I mean, this is definitely a vulnerable thing to talk about. It is
so hard. Excuse me. It is so hard to find somebody who, the majority of the women I've dated post-divorce have had kids.
Okay.
And to your point, the belief systems, where they're raised, right?
Yeah.
In South Florida, there's a lot of women who aren't from the United States.
Yes.
Hispanic. Hispanic kids are just raised differently than us gringo kids, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Pittsburgh and Philadelphia kids, very different, right?
More
right?
White as we get.
Exactly. So that comes into play too. And to your point, I think that finding that perfect match, like you have time. I'm going to tell you, you're doing everything you need to be doing, right? And concentrating on your daughter right now, guess what? It's not a bad thing. And it's a hard conversation to have with somebody, but saying, hey, I need to concentrate on Sloan right now. I'm not giving you what you want. It's pretty obvious that I'm maybe at this point in time and not the right man for you. Guess what? Kudos to you for many men would stay in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you didn't. And I've had that damn conversation more times than you know, where I say, listen, I hate that it's like the Seinfeld, it's not you, it's me thing.
Yeah.
But it kind of is. Like
it
it always seems to be me. Always seems to be me.
100%.
And I'm okay with that. But it's not like I worry about the future, but I'm so focused on just being a great dad right now at this point in time that if I'm going to choose to share my time with somebody, they better be damn spectacular.
Yep. I agree with you 100%. And I think, some of the things that I think about in that aspect too is, one, it's the formative years for Sloan. Like you said, like I'm not going to get those back. I want those with her. And I also do, one of the things I struggle with, and I think that I think we got enough time. We can talk about it for a second. But one of the things I struggle with in that aspect is I also want to show her how to treat a woman and be affectionate and what it's like to watch your dad give affection to somebody, receive affection from somebody, be intimate with somebody, like touch their shoulder when they're in the house, like do all of those things. And that's definitely something I struggle with, where it's like, okay, but I don't think I have the time for that person or letting that person in. But then if I do, am I going to show those? Those are all the things that go through your mind as a single guy with a daughter specifically, of like, okay, what all am I showing her? Am I showing her the emotional range and the emotional intelligence? Am I giving her too much attention to where she thinks she's only daddy's princess and is never going to want somebody else to come into the picture? And like, it's interesting, right?
I laugh because we sit here and you say all these different things that are going through your head, parenting, dating. How the heck are we supposed to concentrate on somebody else and not ourselves and our daughters right now? Think about that. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you just listed 10 different things.
Yeah.
This. How, as men, are we supposed to say, you know what? I'm open up again. I'm ready to date, and here we go. For me to even go on a date was hard, let alone to create a relationship with somebody when you're so focused on being the dad. Listen, we're men. We're not, I mean, in many ways we're superheroes, but we're still human beings,
Sure.
right? And we have to kind of fill this bucket, I guess you could say, of being a father first and foremost.
Yep.
Otherwise, something's going to get lost in that relationship with our child. So again, I'm going to say kudos to you for having that conversation with this lady. She sounds like a very nice woman. But kudos to you for kind of putting you and Sloan on the front burner, maybe pushing her to the back burner for now.
Yep.
Doesn't mean forever,
Sure.
right? But you talk about all these things as single dads. Married dads don't go think through all this stuff like we do. I'm telling you, they don't.
No.
You know what I mean? No. And especially single dads who want to be super present for their kids. I'm thinking about this stuff. It's not a battle, but it's a constant thought process. Am I doing the right thing?
Well, and how is this domino going to affect the other dominoes? If I never bring a girl around my daughter and she's 12 or 14 and I finally do, what the fuck's that going to look like?
Rock, I'm sorry to interrupt. That is right there for me. That's everything. Because some of my buddies are like, oh, Ellie's never going to see you with a girl. Like, how's that going to make her feel? I said, at this point, I'm not really worried about it.
Sure.
But yes, you're exactly right.
Right.
100%, man. I get it.
Yep.
You don't want him to see your dad as this big loner that never has a woman in his
Sure.
life. But you also don't, like, when I was younger, I met 7 or 8 different guys when my mom was going through the process. Right. I met every single construction worker in southeastern Pennsylvania. I swear to God.
It's so funny. So the other day, we went line dancing I love my mom. We went line dancing with my mom, and she's single, so she's going on dates. And sometimes if we go line dancing, she brings her date or, whatever. And she likes me to meet them early on because I can shake their hand, look them in the eyes and be like, boom, here you go. Yes or no, and there's about 3 of them. I've shook her and looked them dead in the eyes and was like, ba, 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 ba. And mom was like, I found out ba, 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 ba. Literally 2 weeks later, you were spot on. So she likes me to do that. And I'm like, whatever, it's fine. And, we're driving home and Sloan goes, boy, Mima sure has a lot of boyfriends. It's like, oh my God. So I tried to explain to her, I'm like, she's just meeting people. They're not actually boyfriends. She's 6. You know what I mean? But those are the things you think about. So it's like, I don't want to introduce her to too many. I don't want to not introduce her to any. Boy, it's interesting. And this is an interesting navigation because, she did play with that girl's, kids and all that kind of stuff. And so it definitely affects. And it's like, oh man, I don't know. You always question, am I making the right choice? Like, I think that's the incessant question as a single father is, am I doing the right thing? Am I harming her psyche? Am I making it the best that I can? Because all we want in the end is them to just end up fucking better than we are.
Yep. And be good people, right?
Yeah.
That's all. I just want my daughter to be good and be happy. She doesn't need to be an inventor or billionaire. I just want her to be happy and have a good, solid life. That's the best. That's the most I can ask for.
One of my best friends, he did the first podcast with me, and I asked him that question, like, what's the one thing that you can instill in your child, that when they're 18, they leave the house that they value or belief system that they have, or like that you hope they bring to the world or whatever. And he was like, I just want them to be well adjusted and happy. That's all I care about. And I think that we're definitely ushering in an era now where that's becoming more of the norm, of like, we don't need to step on top of everybody to get to where we want to go. You can work hard, you can respect everybody, you can be happy, and you can still get there. And one of the most valuable things, and I brought this up too, and we'll end on this, but I was interviewing one of my friends, and he's a musician, and he said, it's an infinity game. It's a forever game, being a parent. He was like, there's no end game, so there's no rush. Just be there and be present. And I was like, God, that's fucking awesome.
That's good.
And that's pretty much what they want. Almost every time we've boiled down to something, it comes down to like, how present was I being, which is what phone jail got created for.
It's an amazing idea.
Yeah. Everybody make a phone jail, send me pictures, tag me. They're fucking awesome. Your kids will love it. I don't care how old they are. Kids 14 years old, put your phone in a phone jail and theirs and spend time together. See what happens. See the communication. Like you want your kid to be able to tell you like, man, this boy tried to kiss me and I didn't like it and I don't know how to handle the situation. You want her to come to you, start making a phone jail. No distractions.
God bless you, brother. You're doing a great job, man.
Thank you.
You're really doing a great job.
Thank you very much. This was amazing. Anything else you want to share?
No, thanks for having me on today. I look forward to doing this again, hopefully.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more I want to get into with you in time, but happy to be here today. So thank you, friend.
I love this. Awesome. Thank you, brother.